everyone, it's Christy. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing very well. I am checking my audio now because I didn't do it at the start of the show. Hello, everyone. It is Sunday, and that means it's Weekend Winters. So I hope you are doing well wherever it is, whenever it is you are in the world, morning, noon, afternoon, morning, evening, afternoon, middle of the night, whatever. Hello, everyone. And today on the show, I have not so much prepared. It might be a short show. I know I say that a lot and then end up interacting with the chat or something, and it goes for much longer. But we'll see how it goes. I have a few things I want to talk about today, and I want to try to get this window that your chat is in a little bit bigger. But one of the things I do want to start off with is an absolutely hilarious story. There are so few things that we can be happy about and laugh about in the time of Trump, in the time of fascism, that I thought we would take a little bit of time and enjoy some schadenfreude when we talk about the Trump voters. So let us get on. Let me get to the right screen, and we're going to take a little look-see over here Hey, now I'm in the corner. Hello, chat. Oh, yes. As I said, there's not a lot of sources of happiness when it comes to political fascism in the United States. So I thought I would take, also the first time I'm talking today, so sorry if I'm warming my voice up at you. Yesterday there was a Trump boat parade in Texas, of course, because Texas. And a bunch of the boats sunk. Now, nobody was injured and nobody died, so we can totally laugh about this without any worries about, mocking someone's pain. This was just, for me, hopefully, a harbinger, an omen, a summing up, the epitome of the Trump 2020 campaign. I'll probably get done for copyright stuff, but we absolutely have to take a look at some of this coverage. So let's... Oh, I have to turn the sound on for you guys. Otherwise, you won't hear anything. But this was pretty funny. Let's see. Around Texas. Yeah, so the idea was all of these super smart Trump types. We're going to... Let me just adjust my camera so I'm centered a bit more. I can see I'm not centered in the frame. It's annoying me. The organizer decided they wanted to put together this Trump boaters or boaters for Trump, whatever it was, Trump boat parade, something with Trump and boat in it was the name of the event. And they had to go down, anyway, it'll explain, but basically they created so much disturbance in their own area when they were boating that they caused other people to sink. It's just such a wonderful metaphor for how Trump messes up your life. So I think you guys can see this now. Yep. Let's have a little look-see as to the coverage. This is from KSAT 12, presumably somewhere in Texas.
The talk of social media today, a major boat parade for President Donald Trump, resulting in several boats underwater this afternoon in Travis County.
Sorry. Yeah. Their boats are going to be fine. It's just property. They can, bail it out. There's, no harm, no foul in this case. Just a lot of schadenfreude.
That's according to the sheriff's office there.
The parade kicked off around 11:30 this morning on Lake Travis and lasted for hours. The night team's Japhanie Gray joins us in the studio now with the latest on this incident. Japhanie, it was originally reported that no one was hurt.
That's right, guys. After seeing the video, it's actually shocking. No injuries were reported, let me tell you. In fact, the only distress calls that did come in was for the boats.
So what happened was, maybe they'll explain it, but in part of the lake, it seems like it narrows into a bit of a channel. And someone described it, I don't know if it was in this piece or a different one, that when you get enough boats in that area, because the narrowness, it turns into a washing machine. So you get a big boat that comes through and then its weight goes, waving through. And then another one goes and you get this sort of effect. And as a consequence, the waves start to get really high and boats will tip and take on water. And that's precisely what happened. So, yeah, I really hope someone got a picture of, the Trump 2020 sinking as well. It's just such a symbol of incompetence and half-arsed types of organizing and thinking about things ahead of time. But yeah, they'll probably find a way to blame it on Democrats because they never take responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault, and then they talk about victimhood culture. Anyway.
Thousands of supporters of President Donald Trump flocked to the lake, whether they were getting in the water or not. Despite COVID-19 warnings for the Labor Day weekend, many said that they were just out there to have a good time.
Oh yeah, this is the other thing. Of course, these Muppets not only are, fair enough, it's outside, which is a better place to be doing socializing than indoors, where there's no air movement. But on the other hand, they're not even trying with the face masks. They're not even sort of like, I don't see any face masks under their chins or on their ears or anything. They're just pretending like COVID doesn't exist. I don't understand it. Simply don't understand it.
But here's where the problems started, with boats varying from a 60-foot yacht to 8-foot fishing boats going in the same direction at different speeds. Rough waters created a choppy path for those participating. The first...
There you go. There you go. It's like a sinking boat. I'm sorry, it is pretty funny. Oh, and I do have something on Twitter after this that we can watch, by the way. So, yes, I mean, what... These people are supposed to be experienced boaters. Shouldn't they have known this? Shouldn't they have known this?
Boat in distress call came 20 minutes into the parade. That was the start of many more calls, with the last one coming in around 2 p.m. The organizer of the event says that she had no idea so many people would show up to celebrate the weekend while supporting President Trump's hopeful re-election.
Oh, yeah, this
woman. Personally,
talking about a Karen here. This woman, she was interviewed by I watched multiple news agents, like local news coverage of this, and she's interviewed in all of them as the organizer. Organized, now famous for having boats sink. So, well done you. But like, no one's going to remember the good day. Maybe she will and some people who were there. But for the rest of the country, this was just the Trump boat parade that sank. And this is your organizer. I'll give you a Nancy Pelosi clap.
This is about, I'm a mother, and this is about my child's future.
She really wants white supremacy to be preserved going forward so that she can be exploited by richer white people, but not as bad as brown people. So, you know.
And what I want that to look like.
White.
And this is my way of also stepping up and saying that, yes, I'm going to vote, but I wanted to do more.
So I wanted to sink other people's property. Well, no, I wanted to organize things so other people's property gets damaged. Woohoo! Smart.
This was something that I could do.
As of tonight, the sheriff's office said that they were still sorting out just how many boats went under. They say it is unclear how many calls came in, how many boats sank, and how many were towed.
Nobody knows anything. Just typical Trump. Typical Trump.
In the studio, Daphne Gray, KSAT 12 News.
There you go. I really hope that we look back on the boat parade and think, yeah, that was a metaphor for the rest of the campaign. Because, in all honesty, it just sort of sums up the incompetence. I think, personally, I'll put my speakers away. All right, so now that we've kind of got in on the big story, said hello, I can say hi to the chat. I don't know if this makes any difference at all. I'm just going to, break the fourth wall. Not really, no, I'm always talking to you. But a little behind the scenes, maybe that's it. I am, since I think the last time I did a show, this is the first time I'm working, I think, with this sound absorber that I got. So I'm just going to turn this a little bit and turn it down. So if you guys can see there, I have, well, hold on, violent sexy dancing coming up. All right. It's an absorbent thingy-mabob. So now I'm not using it. I have no idea if you can hear the change in the quality or not. But ooh, sorry about that. Absolutely did not mean to do that. Yeah, this piece is meant to basically help absorb some of the sound waves and give it more like a radio studio quality. And I'll probably just disconnect my microphone and do everything else. So we'll see how that, I don't know if you guys experience any audio quality improvement, if it sounds more intimate, if it sounds more like a radio studio when I've got a little bit of my sound waves absorbed from behind it. But yeah, that's just a little geeky thing. And let me now readjust my pop mic that I put out of place. All right, now I've got my thing again. I've got my setup again. So if you guys do hear any difference, let me know in the chat. I guess I could come back and listen to the show, but that would be work. I can't be bothered to do that. But I am, when I'm not tapping my own pop filter, yeah, I thought I would give it a test out because I was recommending sound absorbing equipment, and I ordered this one. It wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. Honestly, I've had to sort of adapt it for my microphone because it actually doesn't fit on my mic stand. I didn't realize that till after I ordered it. But anyway, not that that's interesting to you, but it's interesting to me as a producer of audio recordings, I guess. Right. Antifa Navy was trending on Twitter earlier. That's pretty funny. I didn't mean to do that. I'll tell you what, I'll turn the sound off for you guys. Alright, I didn't mean to actually do the audio on that. Sorry. But this was pretty funny. I think we've talked about Brent prior on the show. He's a comedian dude doing stuff on Twitter. Mostly, parodies of Trump people. Let me just move that down slightly. And yeah, this is a pretty funny little comedy bit that he put out yesterday about the Trump boat parade. I'll go ahead, now that the show is going, I'll retweet that in case you want to watch it yourself afterwards. But now I'm going to have to put the sound back on or you're not going to hear anything. Alright, so here we go. Brent, I think, what's his last name? Starts with a T. Terhune, something like that. And he's got a bit of a southern accent, so, alright. Very funny. Here we go.
I'm getting a bunch of calls and texts, so I figured it'd just be easier to jump on Facebook and let everybody know, but I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Yes, that was my boat that went down on Lake Travis during the Trump boat parade, and I don't know what happened. I just think we had too many MAGA flags on the boat. I never thought I'd say that, but we had too many MAGA flags on the boat, and the wind picked up, the current shifted. I couldn't tell what was port and what was starboard. A bunch of other nautical terms happened. One thing led to another, and I was in the water, and I turned around, and she was gone. The SS Margaritaville is gone, and I love that boat. She was my personality, and them flags would be lowered to half-mast tonight if they hadn't been lowered to the bottom of the lake earlier today. They had to fight to get me out. Because if I'm not going to wear a mask, I'm damn sure not going to wear that life jacket they kept throwing at me. I just kept saying, leave me, I want to go down with her. Obviously, I'm here, I'm safe, I'm on dry land, and I'm still going down with the ship. So I just want to thank everybody for reaching out.
Again, very good. Not a lot of opportunities, as I said, to be light and just laugh. Like I said, a bit of schadenfreude in this very stressful time. So there you go. All right. So Neo Ripshaft thinks you do notice a slight difference, but you need a proper blind test to be confident. Yeah, fair enough. You might have just been primed by seeing it and having it explained to think that the sound quality is slightly improved. When I listened to some of my games on my D&D gaming channel, I thought that I heard a slight improvement. And the other thing I'm hoping it'll do too is to guard against the window noise from the traffic. So I do have it sort of like positioned usually slightly more so it blocks off a little bit more on my window side. That was that. Any reactions? I guess I can check the chat a little bit, see what you guys are saying. Hello, Angus, and good evening. I really hope someone got a Pulitzer Prize-worthy picture of a sinking ship with Trump 2020 on it. That would be good. As DNF fans said, they'll probably find a way to blame it on Democrats, of course, because nothing is their fault. Yes, Antifa Navy was trending earlier on Twitter. Maybe we could check that out. Some of the pictures look like they were overloading the boats. Yeah, I think that was also the case as well. Let's go ahead and turn the desktop audio off now, just in case anything else gets set off. It's not interfering with your listening experience. And she really wants a secure future for her children, something. I like fascism. Yeah. Oh, you didn't say that, Neo Ripshaft, but I said it. The other thing I thought to talk a little bit about today, this was actually suggested by one of my patrons / supporters of the channel, Matthew. He was talking about the concept of shy voters.
The first time I heard about a shy voter phenomenon was in relation to British elections. It was when I think Tony Blair was running against John Major. And there was a phenomenon that pollsters in the UK referred to as shy Tory, might have been shy Tory syndrome. Hi, the lucky wanderer. The description of shy Tory syndrome was the idea that because it was sort of more socially unacceptable to vote conservative in like social circles in public and stuff, people who intended to vote conservative would not express their desire to do so, or they would not confide in people they didn't know and tell them their voting intentions. So they would say one thing to the pollsters and do another thing in the ballot, with their ballot or in a polling booth, station, location, whatever you want to call it. Shy Tory syndrome was, I think, blamed for like a couple points of difference between the actual results. So we can actually look it up. Shy Tory. Oh, am I having... Let me know if that's any better. No, yes, tell me if, yes, let me know if I see that you guys are all commenting now. I think it was maybe when I moved over my mic when I was showing off my thing. So let me know. I will wait to see if I sound normal now. I'm making a ransom offer. Maybe it's a restream thing too. Oh no, I'm not a restream. Alright. Can you tell me if that's better now, if I have to reconnect my audio? Okay, good, yes. It's just an audio thing. Thank you for the feedback, everyone. Yes, I have to figure out a better setup for this. Okay. Hurrah! Thank you for the feedback. Right, Shy Tory factor. All right, yeah, that works as well. Yeah, I was right. John Major, Tony Blair. Shy Tory factor, name given to opinion polling company phenomenon, first observed by psephologists in the early 1990s. They observed the share of the electoral vote won by the Conservative Party was higher than what was said in the polls. And then this is something that's been a phenomenon that they've talked about ever since. In the United States, it was called the Bradley effect, because of course we didn't have Tory voters, but it's a similar thing about social desirability and reporting your vote intention. So the Bradley effect is a theory concerning observed discrepancies between voter opinion polls and election outcomes in some U.S. government elections where a white candidate and a non-white candidate run against each other. So no, this is a little bit different because, as you can see in the British case, they're linking it to social desirability when it comes to political identification. And in the United States, you observe the same phenomenon, but they're linking it to the social desirability of saying you're going to vote for a white or a non-white candidate. So let's have violent, sexy dancing causing deep voices. Yes, that's it. That's it. Well, I think also, before I go on the Bradley effect, you can't really see here. Let me tip this down again. So my connection here, I do like my snowball microphone, but where it sits is not super, how do I say this? It's not very stable. And so if it gets knocked, or if I move the stand back and forward, it can get hooked on something and pulled a little bit out. So it's still connected, but it's not a full connection. And then as a consequence, the sound changes. So sorry about that, more violent, sexy dancing. But it's just I don't have a professional studio, so that's the problem, just so you know. If anyone else you hear have a deep voice problem, just say, oh, your back connection on your microphone is probably... So anyway, moving away from audio issues and back to, now I'm all paranoid. Make sure it's pushed in all the way. That's what she said. Even when Kevin's not here, I gotta do the jokes for him. All right, so in the Bradley effect, the theory proposes that some white voters who intend to vote for the white candidate will tell pollsters they are undecided,
or likely to vote for a non-white candidate. So it's a social desirability issue. And I think maybe one of the flaws here is we talk about in social science latent concepts or latent constructs or latent attitudes, and that these underlying attitudes drive what we see are manifest or visible attitudes. Here, what we're really measuring is a form of social desirability versus vote reporting. But in the United States, it was first observed with a dimension of racial self-awareness or worries about being perceived as racism, and it's only white voters. You see, the Bradley effect is by definition only available for white voters to experience. And whereas in the UK, when they did it, it's a shy Tory factor, so they frame it in terms of all conservative voters. Whether it's manifesting, whether the social desirability and vote choice reporting to pollsters is that is, I want to say, is the latent, that's the unobservable phenomenon. And then the way it manifests depends on the kinds of politics going on. We've had it for a while. Good to know that all I need to do to sound more like a dude online chatting is move my microphone around too much. Just play around with the connection and it'll drop it down. I know what you mean, though. I heard Kevin on his Twitch stream, and it sounded like a slow version. Like, it was very disturbing. So thank you again for giving me the feedback. My chat's got my back. I appreciate you guys. So we've had this concept around since at least the 1990s, 1992. When was the Bradley effect? Trying to find the year. 1982. All right, so it's even earlier in the United States. But in the United States, it was linked to race. Whereas I think it's just a social desirability problem. There is now, so what Matthew asked me to bring up was related to this discrepancy in the social desirability of saying that you're going to vote for Trump and reporting accurately to a pollster. This is my true vote intention. And honestly, I don't really know if I buy the idea of shy Trump voters anymore. I really don't. After 4 years, it's not unacceptable to be supportive of the president. I mean, obviously it is morally unacceptable, and it is unacceptable to democracy. But in the evangelical circles, in the white circles, in all of that stuff, I'm trying to think, maybe in the suburbs, maybe in some suburbs in some parts of the country, there might be more of an anti-Trump feel. But I don't honestly think. I'm just trying to think, where are these shy Trump voters? And Nate Silver brings this up. I agree and I disagree with Nate Silver. There are times that I think he's just too myopic and caught in his own bubble, and he's very much caught in like a white journalist's bubble. I'm sorry, but it's true. Like, he just tends to be very conventional wisdom and not thinking outside the box, I think, very much sometimes. And on other issues, I think he's got some good insights. So, like with everything with psephology, it's a lot of opinion with some data to back it up. But he writes, it's good to have a conversation about shy Trump voters and other reasons why the polls might be wrong, but the presence of these conversations is a bearish sign for Trump. I never remind, honestly, which one is bearish and which one is bull? I don't do stock market stuff. So we'll say bear versus bull. Let's see, which is bearish good or is, I don't know. Bull market. All right, here we go. An overview of bull and bear markets. A bull market is a market that is on the rise, where the economy is sound, whereas a bear market exists in the economy that is receding, where most stocks are declining in value. All right, so by saying it's bearish, then what you're saying is that Trump's popularity is receding. I think so let's see what he has to say in his second tweet. But the presence of these conversations is a bearish sign for Trump. Why? For now, most of Trump's 30% winning chances stem from the fact that there are still 2 months to go, and the race doesn't have to tighten that much for the Electoral College to be competitive. But if the polls still look like this in November, his chances will be lower by 10% or so. I would agree that if, as an incumbent president, you are having to explain deficiencies in your polling relative to your opponent on shy Trump voters, what you're basically saying is, I need to find invisible people to support me and then find a way to explain why they're not showing up in the polls. And if that's what he's saying, and I had to read this a couple times, but that's true. There is a bull statue, so they want a bull market, or they're full of bull crap, which is mostly the case. But Trump's polling has been, as I said on the last happy hour, if we were in any other situation, if we were in a normal election with a normal, presidential candidate, if Trump was like not George W. Bush, but his dad, when he lost his re-election bid, I think most people would be asking, the focus would be on, how can Trump possibly save his campaign before November? The narrative would be Trump is in trouble. The narrative would be Trump is flailing. He's got to make up all of these grounds. There's this ground in the various states, yada, yada, yada. Instead, what we've got is Dems are panicking that, oh my gosh, Joe Biden is only 10 points up in national polls. And you go, oh no, national polls, 10 points up. Oh, that doesn't matter. It's the state polls. Oh, in the state polls, he's up 4 points, but that's not outside the margin of error. And I get it. The problem for me in this election isn't the polling. I think the polling in 2020 is better than the polling in 2016 was. People learned from the difference between the popular vote and the state distribution of Electoral College delegates. That was very well reinforced now. And people look to the national polls for trends, but they don't get comfort for them. They're looking at the individual state polls. I agree with all of that. I also agree that the problem in 2020 isn't people who want to vote, or even having enough people to support Biden. It's, will their votes get in and counted? And that's where, so it's not a political campaign issue. It's a democratic process issue. It's a democratic legitimacy issue. And the more work that's being done to move polling places, loose hair, into arenas where there's a lot of space and they can circulate the air and people can wear masks and social distance very easily, the more people that have an opportunity to drop off their ballots early, to, like myself, I wish I could trust the USPS, but I just can't, so I'm going to have to give some business to FedEx, and I'm going to use a tracking number and make sure that I know exactly where my ballot is and require a signature from the county clerk or the town clerk to make sure I know that it's arrived on time. So, so if we look at the election 2020, the nationals, Trump versus Biden, the average is a 7-point spread, which just is huge. I mean, if this was a normal election, we would already be just talking about the Biden presidency, in a little bit. But because I think everyone on the left or in the center, and some people on the center right, have the crap scared out of them by the situation, that even a lead outside of the margin of error, it has to be almost like a lead outside of the margin of error by double the margin of error before people will be like, okay, that's a safe seat or that's a safe state. And I get that. I get that anxiety. I'm a bit tired of it. I'm tired of how unfair it is that we have to live in this sort of, like white privilege. I haven't lived in a lot of fear of my country or my what the situation is for a long time, my whole life really. But it's just, it's exhausting to have to be winning and still feel like you're losing. To be out there and see the support and see people working and doing their hardest and trying in my little way to promote ideas or financially support the candidates, and yet still feel like I can't relax or trust that the popular will be enacted. It's pretty exhausting. So the Lucky Wanderer, I saw some polls that suggested the gap closed somewhat after the Trump National Convention. I saw the opposite, actually. I don't know what stories you saw. But we can look that up because that's polling. I love talking about polling. Happily talk about polling. Trump no convention bump. Boom. I think it was probably in the Washington Post. But yep, we can look at this one from CNN. So this is the 30th of August. That would have been what, like about a week ago? It's gonna be about a week ago. Okay. Yeah, about a week ago. And normally what you see after a convention is a 3 to 4 point shift. Let's have a little look at it. I mean, convention bounces I don't really care about because they're like sugar highs. They're too far out from the end of the election to make any difference. And so although I know that oh, I can hear sound. You guys can't. I can hear someone talking. It's coming out of my head. Oh, be quiet, Schmirkanish. All right, there we go. Really glad I put the audio on mute so that you weren't listening to that while I was talking. But let's look at convention bounce. Bounce. Okay. Convention bounce, not definition, probably just a generic. Yeah, wiki. Let's go wiki. Oh, I see one. Here's Trump may have gotten a convention about a bounce, but it's. So we can look. Ooh, convention bounce from Sage Research. What's this? Let's go look at this thing over here. Yeah. Lincoln Project. I just saw another Twitter account called Republicans for Biden. There's the whole group called Republicans Against Trump that puts out videos constantly on YouTube. Support for presidential candidate usually spikes during their nomination conventions, a phenomenon so reliable its measurement has become a staple of pre-election polling and commentary. Some of these convention bounces have been very short-lived. Most. The race quickly reverting to its pre-convention level between the candidates. Others have been more profound, a coalescing of voter preferences that has charted the course for the remainder of the campaign. Trying to remember when any convention had that. It might not be in America. But maybe it is. Is it only in convention? So anyway, while convention bounces have been apparent since 1968, focus on the convention bounce owes much to Bill Clinton, who soared from a dead heat against Republican incumbent George H.W. Bush before the 1992 Democratic Convention to nearly a 30-point lead after it. While the race tightened, Clinton never again probably fell behind. I remember watching that convention. Pretty sure our family was on vacation. We would take I think it was a week, and rent a house on Lake Wapaka. And so for a week we would go up there and we would just be on the water for a week, the family together. There'd be 4 of us because it was me, my brother, my two stepsisters, my mom and my stepfather at the time. And yeah, we'd all bung into this house and then spend a week just on the lake. And it was in August, and I think I have a distinct memory, if I don't know if it was 96 or 92. I was driving. It doesn't matter. Anyway, convention bounces, I tend to think that they have no effect. I mean, they can look at maybe that one for Clinton in 1992, but there were a lot of other factors that were way more important for him in 1992. The economy, the fact that we had Reagan, and then a Bush term, so we had 3 terms of a Republican president. There were a lot of factors, and I don't think that you can point at a convention and, you can say this is where it started. He had a good convention, and then he kept going. But convention bounces, generally, they're on a time series format, and by that, when you have an event that happens, there's also a decay rate. The effect of that thing won't last forever. You can apply this to any social phenomenon. The effect of George Floyd's murder is still being felt, but it is not as, people don't focus on it as much. The media is not as focused on it. It's not driving political opinion as much as it was the closer in time to when the event happened. So how long an event affects a population is sort of the decay rate of that effect. And when you have something like, let's say, 9/11, you can, if you go and look at George W. Bush's polling, he gets up to like 89-90% approval rating as a president, and then it decays over time. But it takes a long time for people to, the rally around the flag effect to end. Whereas a convention bounce, I don't know if it lasts more than a week or two. The search of autocompletes give a hint of what we can expect in today's session. What did I have? I have no idea what was in there. Oh, it was over here. Oh, Thornwhip and Cleric. No, that was from my game last night. There's no, the Spouting Fish Waterdeep. There might have been a pub or two that I was looking up a location for. Yes. Trying to find, actually there's a really cool, what I was trying to find on that, sorry, I'll get totally distracted on here. But there is an interactive map that you can go to that has a bunch of locations on Waterdeep, which makes it super easy because the map itself that I have, the pull-out map, is not at all easy to use. So you can, like, I don't know what this is here, you just click on that and it tells you what it is. That's super awesome. All right, yeah, tonight we're starting our D&D Dragon Heist game over on my other channel. So, yeah, that was looking up various pubs around around Waterdeep. All right, so let's see. Convention bounce or convention bump refers to an increase in support the U.S. presidential candidate has after the convention was televised. There's also a VP bounce after you get the pick. But basically, benefited from one of the largest bumps in history after the Democratic National Convention '92, climbing by as many as 30 points in the polls. However, this was assisted by independent Ross Perot, who at the time was polling at 20%, withdrawing from the race. You see, I was super skeptical of a convention being a changing event. It's just, it's not, it's a rally effect, it's a media dominance for the time, and people kind of clue in, and a few people change their minds. But I think it's important, this is really, really important, that it wasn't the convention here that was the factor that ended up, in my opinion, that would shift people. It was that Ross Perot left, and a bunch of voters now had no candidate and had to pick between an incumbent they didn't like and an up-and-comer. And if in a bad economy, you're going to get a change election. That's more likely than not, in a bad economy, the party that is in the White House is going to be kicked out. Some party leaders blame the former primary challengers, Pat Buchanan's divisive speech, which aired, blah, 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 blah. Nobody remembers a convention in November. Nobody makes their decision based on what happened at a convention. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. So I kind of see conventions in a similar way as I see debate effects. Debate effects also last for maybe a week, maybe 10 days, if it's profound. Even if you get little quips like, I've known John Kennedy, I worked with John Kennedy, sir, you are no John Kennedy. That's not going to sway a voter. People might remember a line, but it's very, very rare that you get a significant number of people who are undecided. This is what happens, needs to happen for you to have an effect, right? People who haven't made up their minds yet need to either watch the event or see coverage of the event. All right, so we've already got a smaller pool of people. Get rid of all the people who made up their minds. Then from all the people who haven't made up their minds, all the people who just checked out of politics, move them aside. Then they have to watch the event or the media coverage around it and happen to see something in that coverage or event that definitively moves them in one direction or the other. The chances of that happening are just so slim. The world of people that are open to even be affected by that in this election is really small. And that is one of the other reasons why conventions and debates when it comes to, I think, two very well-known candidates like Biden and Trump, they are known brands. You're not going to get a lot of undecided voters at this point. So what you might get is some enthusiasm changes. You might get some disaffected Dems who are on the fence, who are saying, yeah, I'm going to vote for Biden after a good performance, or, whatever. But is a debate going to determine how people vote? Is a convention going to determine how people vote? No. That's not the calculus most people make. From my own research, and I think, I haven't had the chance to be funded in the States, and the States would be much more complicated to analyze. But the first step, mostly, if people don't have a super strong party identification, I'm a very strong identifier with the Democratic Party, to the annoyance of some people on the left. But I feel like you have to be a member of the team in order to be part of the process of solutions. We had a discussion about this, about neoliberal, how some people just want to stand outside of the system generally. They want to stand outside the tent and pee into it. And I am inside the tent saying, stop peeing into our tent. You're not helping. I'd rather work within the party than outside of it and just criticize it and feel super pure. Where was I going with this? So we talked about voters and convention bounces and making up your minds. Oh yes, how people vote. If you are a strong identifier, you will just vote for your party identification, just like being a Packers fan or a Vikings fan or a Birmingham fan or whatever else. You're like, I don't care if I move to Texas. I don't care if I move to New York City. Voting for Democrats because I've always voted for Democrats and Democrats do the best job. Or Republicans, whatever your jam is. If people don't have a super strong party identification, or if they're willing to think tactically, they will look at each race and figure out, relative to my choices, how do I maximize my preferences? If there is a pro-choice Republican who is, running on the ticket, and maybe there's a pro-life Dem, and they'll think, well, I'm more in favor of choice, and the Republican's probably going to win here anyway. So it's a little bit more difficult with the states because it's so binary with Republicans and Democrats. But people might be like, okay, well, I'll support this Republican, but not that Republican, and this Democrat, but not that Democrat. That person can't win in this seat, so I'm not going to bother casting a vote for them. There's a bit more of a calculus. People know if they live in a Republican area or a Democratic area. So that is a modifier on their vote choice. What does their vote actually represent? And it's a little less important with a statewide count. Presidents, you don't vote by congressional district. There's less strategic value in where you put your vote in a statewide election than there is in a district-based election. So, coming back to that, how people vote, I think most people at this point have made up their minds as well. So I'll put down undecided voters 2020 because I think it's going to be really small. Ooh, look at this. Undecided voters 2020. Does anyone really change their votes? Undecided voters were key to Trump's 2016 win. That's from August. Swing voters still exist? Yeah, good questions. Modeling undecided voters to forecast the election. Let's have a look at, because it's free, let's have a look at the Newsweek one. I only get so many New York Times articles per week, so I agree. I don't want to subscribe for remaining free articles. From the end of August, let's see. As stark as the differences are between Trump and Biden, millions of Americans can't seem to choose between them. They're the 10% of prospective voters who, with less than 3 months to go until the elections, are technically still undecided. They haven't made up their minds between the Democratic and Republican nominees, currently back third parties, or at this point just don't care. Analysts say there are fewer undecideds in this year than in 2016, when a surge of last-minute converts to Trump among them helped decide the election, but it's still a sizable enough cohort, particularly in battleground states, to potentially determine the results. For Trump, trailing by 8 points on average in the most recent polls, these undecideds present both an opportunity and a risk. Should he stick with the bombastic, polarizing persona that keeps his base energized, which of course he's going to do because he can't do anything else, or moderate his policies and tone? He can't. He's literally incapable, constitutionally incapable of doing that. Making concessions at this late stage could seem at best disingenuous. Right now, the number of voters still firmly aligned with neither of the main two-party candidates is falling, but the race remains open and even seasoned politicos are wary. Let's see, let's have a look at the numbers. They have any actual numbers. Undecided voters had a big hand in putting Trump in the White House 4 years ago. In August 2016, an estimated 20% of voters were still undecided, compared to 10% now. That's, again, very important. Losing 10 points in terms of voters that you can work with narrows Trump's path to victory. Because ultimately, every re-election is a referendum on the incumbent. And people are either with you or they're not. And if you can't bring them over to you, then you've lost the power of incumbency. So having fewer undecideds, I mean, it makes sense. In 2016, both Trump and Clinton were unknown. They weren't incumbents to the White House. Clinton had been in the White House. People saw her as a senator. They saw her as a Secretary of State. They had an idea of what she would be like, but she didn't have a presidential record. Trump was also just sort of he had no experience. He had no qualifications. He had no expertise. He had no knowledge. He had no demonstrable skills. And yet, white businessman, he must know what he's doing. So, in 2016, in August, an estimated 20% of voters were undecided, compared to 10% now. And in key battleground states, more than half who chose in the final week of the campaign went for Trump. So, in some ways, Clinton was almost like the incumbent because people knew more about her. And if they wanted a change election, then that's the direction some people went. Also, voter suppression and Russian interference. So, people who are not as engaged, they get engaged late. That's why it's important to stay with them. Yeah, that's true. Who are the undecideds? That's a good question. Exactly how many votes are still up for grabs? That's an open question because things are hard to measure. According to Jackson and Ipso, about 10% of voters probably haven't made up their minds yet. Great. Around 10% maybe. That would be 21 million voters still opened up to persuasion. But those numbers are sizable enough to potentially have an impact. Not everyone lumped into the undecided group, this is important, doesn't have a preference. Most lean one way or the other. He puts the percentage of actual truly undecideds at 3%. Or roughly 6 million potential voters. That actually sounds more reasonable to me. The people who are in the undecideds, they might not be willing to say at the time, but they do have a preference. And I think when you lead them to, like, if you ask, if you had to vote for one candidate or the other, we looked at this before, the double haters, I don't like Biden and I don't like Trump. The double haters go for Biden over Trump. So that, again, is another positive sign as we head toward November. Of the 14% of registered voters classified as undecided in an Ipsos Reuters survey from early August, only 6% were actually unsure. Another 6% supported a third party, and 2% said they didn't plan to vote this year. Really, really, really small margins. Normally it's the swing voters who really push things back and forth, but I think a lot of stuff is baked in. And that's why, although I understand why people are freaking out over the Joe Biden numbers, I think in a little bit, no. In my heart, I know Democrats are whipping themselves up a bit into a frenzy. Democrats and the left are deliberately, when polls come out with good news, they deliberately undermine the polls themselves and the reliability of the polls and the professionalism of the polling companies. And this is a little bit of a personal, pet peeve, that people see a good poll, but they think, oh my gosh, if anyone takes comfort in this and decides not to vote, then we could lose the election. So rather than talk about voter suppression and how it's important that we take people's support that we see in the polls and make sure that they have a chance to vote. They'll just say, oh, the polls are lying, or the polls were unreliable, or the polls in 2016. And I was like, don't shoot the messenger, man. Don't shoot the messenger. The polls aren't the problem here. The system, the voting system, Trump's interference with the postal service. That's the problem here. The problem is people don't feel secure on the left about their vote. And I don't know if you guys saw it. I guess it's worth saying now in terms of Dems planning to vote early vote by party. There's some interesting data on that. Can I get something? I want something with a date on it. Yeah, that'll work. 1 day ago. I don't want to bring you guys old news. I always want to make sure I give you the freshest, hot off the presses, most recent, like, ooh, still no wrinkles on it kind of data. That's what I want to make sure you have. Alright, let's see. I'm going to just jump in here and jump into the chat and see what you guys are saying. Makes me feel better than the convention bounce is a small bounce. Oh, yeah. So, thank you. Trump basically got no bounce. Before we go over to this, let's go and finish up like my stream of consciousness on that other thing. Boat sinking. So Trump's convention bounce. Is this the one? We had to... Yeah. Trump is baked in. I think this is the one thing to take away from the lack of a real convention bounce. Normally, you would expect to see 3 to 6 points because margin of error and stuff. I don't think convention bounces ever reach double digits. The whole Bill Clinton thing, we see that there was a conflating effect or conflating factor with Ross Perot getting out. I don't think that you can compare 1992 with other convention bounces because it was just had this exogenous event of Ross Perot leaving the race at about that time, and I think you need to control for that effect. But Biden's, I think, moved up a little bit. Let's see. Trump wanted a large bounce coming out of the Republican National Convention. I don't even know why, honestly. They're called bumps for a reason. They're not steps. They're not like you win a bunch of people over and then they stay with you. People who are like on the fence about you, like, yeah, maybe he's not so bad. And then they just like, it goes away. No. If later polling data confirms this early evidence, Trump victory hinges on him becoming the first incumbent in over 70 years to come from behind after trailing following a major party convention. He's been trailing the entire election. And yet Dems and people on the left are just too paranoid to even like let their guards down, which I get because it's up against fascism. Trump's favorable rating stood at 32% after the Republican National Convention. It stands at 31%. Biden's was at 45 last week and it's 46 now, which is just noise. There are no post-convention polls that measure the horse race of Biden versus Trump that meets CNN standards. The evidence we do have is largely consistent with what Ipsos is hinting at. A tracking poll from USC, taken over a week period, has a question probabilistic, who are you voting for, and the probability to vote maybe. And if you average all the national polls, at least partially after the conventions, there may have been a bump of maybe a point or two at most for Trump. Interesting, that made a slight larger bounce that Biden received, which is basically nothing. That's also not what I saw. I saw that Biden had a conflated convention bounce in his VP announcement. So his VP announcement was like very close to the convention and he got a huge bump from that. So I don't know that you can kind of double, like discount that. But I thought he also had a higher favorability after his convention than before. So then there's some like what happens in past elections and who cares because we can't compare Trump with any other election. Let's look at the effects of anxiety on Democratic voters. So North Carolina kicked off early voting on Friday. So if you are in North Carolina, go vote now. Starting to send out absentee ballots to over 640,000 residents, a dramatic height from past election years. And early voting in presidential elections begin Friday, with North Carolina becoming the first state in the nation to send out absentee ballots. Key battleground states are seeing a significant increase in requests for mail-in ballots, and registered Democrats are outpacing Republicans. Although voters in North Carolina have until the end of October to request a mail ballot, the early numbers suggest voting behavior is changing dramatically this year due to the coronavirus pandemic, and offer a snapshot into turnout with 8 weeks to go left in the race. Publicly available data from North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania shows that the mail ballots requested so far there have been significantly more requests made by registered Democrats than Republicans. An estimate of party registration in Ohio by the political data firm Target Smart shows similar results, while Democrats and Republicans are neck and neck in Wisconsin. The only battleground state where Republicans had more requests was Michigan. Now let's have a look at some of these numbers and break them down. Real quick question I see in the chat. Do you think Trump will contest the election if he loses? Yes. He's already setting himself up for contesting the election while it happens. He's sued states already to get ballots thrown out. He's taken states to courts over primaries. He's just told people in North Carolina to try to vote twice. So yes, he's going to try to undermine the results of the election all the way through. Absolutely all the way through. By the way, cannot handle my hopes being broken again. Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know. I don't know, can I say this? This might be the last time Americans have to protect their democracy nonviolently. Might be the last time that you can go to an election and have the result actually have effect and stop fascism. If Trump wins again, elections will become a farce in the United States. Elections will become meaningless. And so then how do you get people out of power? That's a good question. All right. I find it extremely hard to believe citizens engaged enough with the electoral process to be swayed by a convention. That's exactly it. Conventions might take people who are thinking about voting for the Democrats or the Republicans and get them a bit more excited and basically enthuse them enough to bring them over. But it's not going to change anybody's mind. It's not like someone's going to sit down who hasn't got an opinion on Trump and Biden. Who is that person anyway? Watch 2 conventions, be like, oh, I'm going to make my decision based on this. No, that's not how the real world works. That's not how people work. Trump is going to be a problem for as long as he's alive, I think. He is not going to be an ex-president who keeps his mouth shut. He can't be. It's impossible. We have the leader of a fascist movement and the family of a fascist movement, in the United States now. And that's going to be a long-term problem, for which we will have to find political solutions. And certainly it starts with purging. Embrace the word purge. Get anyone who isn't even associated with Donald Trump out of the government. That would be the first thing. I don't think Biden should spend the first day he's inaugurated doing anything other than undoing all the executive orders that Trump did while in office. Every single one of them. The burners are quieter this year. That's twofold. I would say the reason why Bernie supporters are so much quieter this year is, one, he got his ass handed to him. He got his ass handed to him by a guy who didn't even raise any money, who didn't have a campaign structure. And that was because Biden had long-term ties with the Democratic Party. And by that, I don't mean the DNC. I mean the everyday people who worked at the county party, who worked for the state party, who've met him at events over the years, who've been delegates to different conventions, who've seen him come through their state in his other failed presidential bids, people he has relationships with. And he talked more directly, if not sometimes with his foot in his mouth, to black voters and their experiences. And so, Bernie had 4 years to find a way to talk about his political values in a way that connected with people outside the age of 25. And he didn't. Instead, he just sort of like tried to use young people who agreed with him as like legitimation rather than actually reaching out. So he lost ground in every single state, which really took the wind out of the sails for, like for people, for some people on the left who want to say M for A, 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 M for A. Bernie was it's at least to me it seemed like, if anyone supported Bernie, they automatically supported everything Bernie stood for. As opposed to saying people picked Bernie because they didn't like Hillary, maybe because of misogyny, maybe because she was more centrist, maybe because of her record, whatever else. But being against Hillary and voting for Bernie isn't the same as being for Bernie, if you see what I mean. And they took a lot of the support from 2016 mistakenly as support for their agenda when it was really anti-Clinton sentiment. And because it was, instead of it being a woman going up against Sanders, it was a white guy, Biden, who had the same kind of privileges and was acceptable to people who might not have voted for Clinton last time. So their candidate just got his butt handed to him. He dropped out in April, so we didn't have the convention drama all the way up to June. If you remember, Bernie Sanders was still trying to get superdelegates to come over to his side leading up to the convention. He fought it all the way up to the convention. And they booed people. The Sanders people booed people at the convention. So not having a convention, having the candidate, having Bernie drop out in April and endorse. And when Sanders endorsed Biden and they created that kind of working team together to try to bring some of Bernie's ideas into the Biden campaign, there were the Bernie people who were like, okay, it wasn't my choice, but I'm still gonna, I still support Bernie. If Bernie's supporting Biden, then, I think he'll put pressure on him. I'll support Biden. And then there were the Bernie people who, like, Bernie was just a vehicle to get them to closer to a socialist revolution or whatever it is they wanted. And when he backed Biden, they're like, bye, boy. You're too centrist for me now. And Bernie was the vehicle. So you saw, I think, kind of the split in the Sanders movement. The people who really supported Sanders and support his ideas, and the people who were just using Sanders as a vehicle to get closer to a socialist revolution or whatever they wanted. So that, and then, just not having a convention helps a lot to prevent people from being disruptive on the floor of the convention, because there's no convention to do it. I think talking points like draining the swamp would have helped Trump get those swing voters at the time, yes, because he was a new, fresh face. I agree, Transgamer Girl. And with him having done the opposite, they'll swing back the other way. The double haters is actually a term Trump came up with from what I heard. But yeah, if you look at, I'll try to look this up, because there's this, the double haters term. Last time, Clinton, Trump, Biden, they broke for Trump 2-1, and that same demographic, yes, double haters. What's the best way? Moments? We'll go to Bloomberg. Oh, this is 5 days ago. Excellent. 5 days ago is pretty fresh. It's not gone stale yet. I'm not going to do stuff from like last year. Yes, I accept. We'll get down to the intro. Okay, so in 2016, razor thin margin, a fraction of 1%. These are the double haters. All right. So in other swing states, double haters, voters who are cool on both main candidates could be pivotal, but only if they turn out. And will the votes of shy Trumpers cancel out the votes of swinging seniors who say they'll desert the president for Biden? Despite the range of opinions expressed by these voters, one of them, shared by many, is that neither of the major parties speaks for them. I'm a Republican in the most fiscal sense. I align more closely with the Democratic Party on social issues. It's always a struggle for me to vote because I feel there isn't a party I'm 100% in line with. Well, welcome to First Past the Post. Politics is about compromise. Imagine that. Double haters. All right. In 2016, Trump and Clinton competed for an unlikely group, people who disliked both the candidates but still likely to vote. The Trump campaign called them double haters, and in the closing day, they broke decisively for him. This year, the double haters could once again factor heavily in the race. However, voters with unfavorable views of Trump and Joe Biden are an entirely different group. This I didn't know. this time from last time. A civics tracking poll finds that they're primarily young, disillusioned progressives, all right, so they're ex-Bernie supporters, who, if they voted in Democratic primaries, went overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders. So last time, like, the double haters, I think, were like white voters. And this time it's Sanders voters who are mad that they couldn't get everything they wanted, which nobody gets in politics. Hi, Z. Let's see. Many don't identify as Democrats or do so reluctantly. Yep. This is why they were willing to trash the party that is the vehicle to getting them what they want. Because they want to stand outside the tent and pee on everybody and complain about stuff rather than doing the hard work of getting involved and making compromises. That's my opinion, as I'm biased. 40% are Democrats, 8% are Republicans, but Biden is in a much stronger position with these hostile voters than Clinton was 4 years ago. Civics finds that double haters prefer Biden over Trump 58% to 4%. The rest say they're voting for someone else or unsure. That's the whole, I'm going to vote green because both Joe Biden and Trump come from the same system. Therefore, fascism is just like democracy, and I'm going to vote for the Green Party candidate to show how pure I am. Thanks. Right. Biden supports essentially none of the positions I do. I'm not interested in voting for the lesser of two evils if that lesser evil will continue to get more evil. I'm going to let fascism slide because democracy isn't perfect. Wah! I'm sorry, I don't have time for this crap right now. Honestly, like, me. A society's about gradual change. You can't get what you want now. You're just going to throw in the toys out of your pram? Fine. Like, I can't. This is why I feel like people on the left who aren't Rose Twitter, far socialists, this is why you end up having them work with the Lincoln Project. Because the Lincoln Project isn't out there talking about how evil Joe Biden is. Joe Biden is not their first choice. Joe Biden is a stopgap to preserve democracy so that we can have a system where they can play in the system again, as opposed to having a fascist system. So they are looking for areas of agreement. They are focusing on the positive. They are bringing together people on the left and the right who are closer to the center on things that they share values on. And meanwhile, the American left people are just moving themselves into a greater and greater bubble. They're not reaching out. They're just complaining. At least that's what I see. I see a lot of complaining, a lot of, preserving democracy to harm reduction as opposed to like a fundamental principle that unites us. So, yeah, if people want to know, in my opinion, hi Eva, why is it the moderate Dems are happy to align with the Lincoln Project? It's because the Lincoln Project isn't telling them how bad and evil they are for voting and supporting Joe Biden and doing a more gradualist approach to progressive goals. That's really it. They're really shooting themselves in the foot. So, Biden isn't making any real attempts to bring the left into his coalition. That was what the primaries are for. This is the other, like, oh my God, it's just so self-centered. And just such a complete lack of understanding of how elections work. In a primary, yeah, the discourse is around the left or the right because you are competing for people at extremes of the political spectrum. And the people at the extremes are the most, like, vociferous. They're not always the most active, but they talk a lot. They have opinions on things. And maybe they're the most active. They do disproportionately turn out relative to people who don't have a party identification. But once you win the primary, all candidates look to the center. You can't blame Joe Biden for not basically being Bernie Sanders and ignoring all of the Republicans that could possibly vote for him. He has to win a majority of the vote. And so, yeah, he isn't going to pick an extreme, small growing... Bernie Sanders couldn't get you guys to turn out to vote, so why should Joe Biden rely on that demographic? He's much better off relying on seniors who will turn out at much higher rates. And they're a bigger proportion of the voting population. So, just the lack of understanding of the wider picture, too. I think, lends itself to people justifying their own disaffection rather than understanding that you don't hate the player, hate the game. You can't win with the white Bernie wing of the party. It's black people and other like black voters and the moderates. That's what wins elections. Those are the swing voters. So, right. So it looks like double haters are going to be, they might be more on the left this time. But if that's the case, I also feel like they're probably in places where they're going to have less influence. If you have a greater proportion of people who are like middle-aged and living in rural areas and can kind of swing a city or a town, that's one thing. I guess maybe wrongly, I tend to assume that a lot of these more far-left people live in places that are already far left, like New York State and other places like that. Or they're not like, there's, as they say, fewer of them to be swing voters, but there's still some percentage of the vote. So when it comes to early voting, let's look at some numbers. North Carolina had 643,400 voters who have requested an absentee ballot. Of those requests, 337,362 were made by registered Democrats, and 103,620 by registered Republicans. That is massive. That is massive. That means that on Election Day, if all these people vote according to their party alignment or their party identification, then Trump is going to start Election Day down by 250,000 votes. Now, the Democrats have banked their votes. They're in. Like, they can't turn those people out again, obviously. So they will have to rely on, in order to keep that advantage, making sure that they turn out anyone who hasn't voted absentee also votes in person. But having to being down 200,000 votes is a lot. Because it's not like there are that many places in a state that is going to go 80% for you or 90% for you. A lot of places you're going to get like maybe 56% of the vote or 62% of the vote. But that change, like how much you have to make up, that ground, and then you have to get ahead. So, and that might not be all of the absentee ballots that obviously get sent back in, but there might be more requested between now and then as well. Wow, at the same point in 2016, under 40,000 people in North Carolina had requested absentee ballots. That is phenomenal. That is a phenomenal change. They're like, damn. That's all I can say about that. Damn. And of course, from a Democratic point of view, getting people to turn out, the more you get people to send in their absentee ballot votes or their absentee ballots ahead of time, in those under-resourced, with the way that Republicans try to under-resource Democratic wards by giving them machines that don't work, or they give them fewer machines, the more that you get in advance means people can get through the lines faster. And there was a study that showed in one state, if you lived in basically a black-dominated Democratic voting ward, you had to wait 51 minutes to vote. And if you were in a white Republican area, you had to wait 6 minutes. How many more people can you get through if you only have a 6-minute wait? Right? So you take off a quarter of the people who would normally be turning up. That means you can process votes in the Democratic wards faster. So less people are likely to just go, I got to go pick up my kids. I can't wait this long. And you catch that vote. So that's really good. All this talk of middle-aged swingers is making you need a cold shower. You're funny. All right. In Florida, 451,000. 147 Democrats have requested a mail-in ballot compared to 294,951 Republicans. Wow. Trump won Florida by 112,000 votes. So again, Republicans right now would start the day just like you open up the ballots or you open up the polls on the day of the election, and if all of these, like 450,000 people, and let's go on up to 300,000 Republicans, Trump is already down 150,000 votes, starting the day. That's amazing. In Pennsylvania, which Trump carried by less than 45,000 votes, more than 1 million Democrats are seeking a mail ballot compared with 388,000 Republicans. In other words, 70% of the requests that have been made have come from Democrats, while only 25% come from Republicans. Wow. That's super great. This makes me happy. Okay, requesting a ballot and sending it in are two different things. But if you've already demonstrated the willingness, or you're committed enough to go request the ballot, then the follow through is the important part. The other nice thing about voting early is that when people call you up to go, hey, do you know how you're gonna vote? I already voted. I already voted for Biden, or I already voted for Trump. I don't know when I say that. I already voted for Biden. Then they'll take your name off your list. If you early voted and you sent in your ballot, they don't want to call you again because you've already voted. They can't change your mind. They can't sway you before Election Day. So then you just get off a lot of lists. People stop calling you and asking you who you're going to vote for. Wow. Yeah, but Wisconsin party registration is not available, so I wouldn't trust any of those numbers. In Ohio, 50% of the mail-in ballots have been requested by Democrats, while 38% have been requested from Republicans. In Wisconsin, it was a virtual tie at 39% for each party. I don't know how they're getting that. If they look at my county is Republican dominated. I'm voting for Biden. So I don't know how they did the modeling on Wisconsin. For places where you don't have a party registration list or a requirement to be registered with a party to vote for that party, I don't know how you make those numbers reliable. So, yeah, Michigan is the only place where there's an edge, but I also know that Trump is super far behind in Michigan. Wow. This actually makes me feel better. Now, obviously, we've got problems with the Postal Service, things like that, but the sooner you get your ballot in, the sooner it will arrive, and then it won't be like a dump at the last minute. So we just need to, I guess, sadly, we have to keep people scared. But please don't do it by lying about polling. You don't need to lie on polling and pollsters and polling accuracy to keep people scared. When what they should be scared about is not the accuracy of polls, but the reliability of the Postal Service, or the removal of in-person early ballot deposit boxes. That's the stuff people need to be scared about. It's not the opinion polls, it's the process, practices, and policies. Okay. I think I'm running out of stuff to say. I will advertise. All right. So if people want to talk in the chat, this would be a good time to put in any questions. I will see just real quick here what you've said already so I can get some feedback to you all. See, Eva's in the house. Swinging seniors. Yeah, and those seniors tend to, I think they call them swinging seniors because, and this is speculation because I didn't bother to read it, but seniors generally, especially white ones. And then the other thing too is we really need to talk about white voters as opposed to just calling them voters. Rural voters, they're white voters. I mean, I know there are not just white people who live in rural areas, but we tend to eliminate noticing whiteness as if it's just normal. And then we'll label other people like women's vote, or for contra cis men, and the black vote, or black voters, or Hispanic voters. But we never really talk. I mean, I think it's getting better, but there's too often when we talk about middle class voters, middle class white voters who support Trump. Let's put the white in there because the white is one of the best predictors of voting for Trump. White women, white men. That is his base, and then you get people who should be in that base who have drifted away, or who've left, or aren't Republicans. But anyway, what was I going to look for? I was looking for something. I think I was just looking for comments. Okay. So swinging seniors, anyway, yes, tend to vote for Trump more, remembering, but they're moving over to Biden because of the COVID crisis. Lesser evil reminds me of Penn Jillette's stance. Penn being idealistic, libertarian with weird opinions on many matters. Lots of people just have a random set of opinions they hold. They don't necessarily adhere to a consistent ideology. Like a lot of people think, I think this is right, I think that is wrong. But if you point out the contradictions, they'll just go, meh. So few people start from first principles and then derive their morals and values and decisions from those first principles. Most people emote and then they rationalize. I think for the Bernies or busters are fundamentally unaware the Democratic Party will move right if they don't win this election. They will never move left if they lose. The parties, America is just a more right. If you want to, Americans in the aggregate are more right wing than Europeans, and you can, I would say, put this down to a couple things. One, religiosity. When it comes to the social conservative, like social sphere conservative attitudes against homosexuality and other kinds of bigotry in that sphere, a lot of that you can link to higher levels of religiosity amongst the American population compared with their European, Australian, New Zealand peers. So that accounts for part of it. The other part is that Americans are more economically in favor of capitalism than a lot of other Europeans are, or than many Europeans are. And you get pro-capitalist Europeans as well, but they have a ethos or tradition of state benefit or state interference, like state regulation, the state's involvement, right? Because the government has always been involved in business in Europe because you had royal power and then it devolved down. Whereas in the United States, people moved west and stole other people's lands to get away from government. And so as a consequence, small businesses and self-reliance and that whole mythos is very much more part of the American ideal as an economic framework than the idea of government being used to promote equality. And then we come to the last thing, which is systemic white supremacy. That's the other thing, the other factor that is holding America to the political right. America started off as an apartheid country. It was a racist country. It was a country that's power system was structured to give all the power to white men. And that power was used to rule over literally everyone else and used to justify that rule over everyone else. And so to have the state get involved with making things more equal is a direct attack on one of the ways that white supremacy maintains itself, which is economic devastation and poverty, poor education, and lack of opportunities. And then you just funnel people into the prison system. You deny them their right to vote because they've been convicted of a felony that they did a guilty plea for because they didn't. They only had a public defender who's underpaid, and even though they weren't even they committed no crime, they took a plea because they got out in 2 years instead of facing 20. Right? And now they're just in the system. Whatever else. Right? That is another big barrier to something like M4A. There are just white people who will fundamentally resist the idea that, that people who aren't white should be helped. And they may not say it that boldly, but that's where the discomfort comes from. So I don't want to say there's not racism in Europe. There's racism in Europe. But the kind of racism we have in America that's been constructed to keep people oppressed is a conservative effect. And there's an entire population that is invested. They think that their equality depends on other people's oppression. They wouldn't say it like that, but any attempts to redistribute it would actually also be a threat to the supremacy of white people in power. And all of those factors pull, I think, America to the right. Socialism can't fix that on its own. M4A won't be able to fix that on its own. We have to, as a country, actually reconcile. White people have to accept our role in the perpetuation of a system of white supremacy. And it's sort of economic almost, it's like I said, there are more white people now who get it, I think, than ever before in history. I think we're still really crappy allies. We don't know how to be good allies as a group. Perhaps some individuals, but there's a lot of black people want to be able to solve the problems or point out problems in the white community, and then a bunch of white people come and start doing arsons and doing other things during their BLM protest, and now black people are getting called thugs and rioters and looters because of what some white allies are doing, Like, we're not ideal. We're not ideal as allies, minimally. But at least there are more and more people who are invested in it. And I think that is one of the things that the far left misses when they just hate on Dems and they hate on centrists, is that they aren't just up against capitalism. They are up against white people who are consciously or unconsciously invested in preserving white power and white supremacy in positions of power. So how did I get on that? I think it was like, if they don't win this election, they'll never, So, I mean, you have to play in the center, and you have to play a little bit on the center right if you want to win the popular vote. And you do that with the knowledge that you're going to then drag the country a little bit farther to the left, and a little bit farther to the left. And is it going to end up with making it illegal to sell health insurance for anything that isn't cosmetic surgery? No, it probably isn't. Not in your lifetime. But maybe we'll have cooperative health options, and maybe we'll have other health where you get to universal health insurance or health coverage without M for A, in the way that it's been, like, the way M for A is defined by some people, which is eliminate all private insurance. And those people exist. All right, let's see what we got here. Progressives lose all the progress they made if Biden loses. Yeah, you'd think people would understand that. It's not like, let's let fascism get so bad that people will finally revolt and they'll finally throw off their chains of capitalism and they'll realize that Bernie Sanders and his burners have been right all the time. Well, at that point, fascism is already 10 years in power, and now all they do is round you up and put you in prison. That's how that goes. All right. Good argument, Christy. I generally make them. No, I'm kidding. Thank you. I don't know what argument I was making, but the Electoral College does bake in an advantage for Republicans, yes. They also have a baked-in advantage for the Senate, correct, due to Democrats tending to be the types of people who move. Well, there's also an issue of just the fact that the founders they constructed power in a way that advantaged, like, propertied white people. And, I mean, there was they had the population, and they disproportionately put advantage on rural areas. You know, the whole thing about the 3/5 compromise, and, you know, the South was always worried about its population relative to the North and smaller states like New Hampshire or whatever to bigger states like Virginia. But as a consequence, it is unfortunate that geography counts more than people. You know, Montana, the votes of people in Montana, we've talked about the problem about this before, but their votes have so much more weight relative to people in California. Because even though California gets more delegates relative to the impact, you know, Montana or Nebraska have a far greater impact, considering their populations. So yeah, the system itself makes it very difficult to get progressive things through in that way, because of the way that power is divided between the parties. This episode is about a completely different kind of swinging. Yes, true. I have to, sorry, my knee is starting to get hurt. It must be about 2 hours now. Hour and a half, okay, yeah. Holdovers from McCarthyism and the Red Scare that makes America more right-wing too. Absolutely. I mean, the whole association, you can look at it generationally and see that people who are under the age of 30 now don't have the same attitudes about the words socialism and communism as their grandparents did. Because their grandparents grew up probably, like, during the Red Scare, and the political socialization at a young age has a lifelong shaping effect, whether it's to reinforce it or to consciously move away from it. But you got that kind of preset. So people who brought up with a suspicion of communism and socialism, they don't think about those words in terms of distribution of resources and democratization of the workplace. They think about Stalin. They think about Mao. And so they associate it with authoritarianism and oppression as opposed to redistribution and democratization. I don't know. I've kind of moved away from viewing religiosity as a factor. I think American is white supremacist. Religiosity in terms of predicting Republican votes is huge. It really is. If you look at it, and it's not just religiosity. Catholics will split. I think Catholics tend to even vote a little bit more for Democrats than Republicans. People who identify as religiously, as practicing Jews, will vote for Democrats, but also vote. There's a certain percentage that vote for Republican. But when it comes to evangelicals, that's where you can do religious identification, not order. Religious identity and voting behavior. The link between voter choice and religious identity, 2009. Oh, this is a little bit old. Who's this? 6th presidential. Okay. A link is found between voter choice and religious identity, where the effects of religious identity on voter choice is contingent on location within the stratification order defined by race, class, and gender. That just basically means it's complicated. The article proposes a theory to explain the contingent link between voter choice and religious identity, taken from classical sociology. So it is to say, people who are black, fundamentalists or black evangelicals, will still vote for Democratic candidates at a much higher rate, whereas white evangelicals it's a good predictor for Republican voting. And I think the reason why I disagree about religiosity as a factor is because it comes down to values. For me, religiosity in some ways isn't a measure of religiosity. When I say religiosity, I don't mean church attendance. I'm talking about the actual value set. And I think the value set of evangelical Christianity is also bound up with that history of white supremacy and the white Christian movement or whatever else, and being anti-abortion and being homophobic and everything else, and that wraps itself up in nicely. So it's not like church. When I talk about religiosity, I'm not talking about church attendance. I'm talking about values, and that's why I think it's still a really good predictor. And it's like Franklin Graham, kind of stuff. He got there as I was typing. A lot of Americans are in America because their ancestors were from the outer types of Protestantism. Yeah. It really only takes roots in places like Northern Ireland in Europe. There was a lot of religious, fundamentalist freaks who came over to be freaky. Yeah, that's definitely the case. Virtually all the supremacist and dehumanizing elements of the regime were taken directly from America. The salute is from American. I don't know. I'm sorry, Neo. I missed that. Poland is pretty conservative and Catholic as well. Yes, although the Polish kind of Catholic movement is, I don't want to get too far into it, but one of the old Pope, wasn't Pope John Paul II, he was Polish, right? Polish Catholic, and he was a bit more on the liberal side, but I think now you get more of a white supremacy thing going on in Poland than it was back in the 70s, kind of Polish Catholic. But we can look at voting by religious group. Voting Biden, I'm sure we can. Trump, Catholic, evangelical. That should be enough. Or evangelica, even. What's that? I'm not quite sure what happened. Oh, I think for some reason it opened up a completely different page. So let's try this again. This time with the word evangelical. Biden targeting on faith. Right. I think I'm going to have to pause the video. No, happily? Oh, yeah, I do. Oh, boo. I'm not turning off my ad block. But what is this here? The recent Pew found Biden leading among Catholic voters. All right, well, then I'll just do Pew up here. Because I know Pew I can visit. Religious identity in the 2020 presidential election. That's 3 weeks ago. It's a little bit stale, but not too bad. Do we have charts? Let's look at charts. Protestants are the largest religious group. Yeah, we know about that. Although there's a lot of factions within. Catholics are too varied to be considered as a monolith. That's true. Come on, no religious identities. The nuns would be going for Biden. The secular people would go for Biden. Oh, give me a chart. Oh, all right. You actually have to read. How annoying. And white mainline Protestants. Group constitutes skews toward Trump. Gallup estimates Trump's approval with non-evangelical Protestants is about 60%, and Pew estimates 61% would vote for Trump. Black Protestants, they don't go for Trump. 89% of all black voters backed Clinton. I just wish they would do this. So anyway, religiosity is still evangelical whites. It's a very good predictor for a vote choice. But I would say for black voters, I would take ethnicity before anything. And with women, I think with women voters and men voters, you'd have to do it by a crosstab of, I think you can use white as a heuristic for white evangelical, even though you're going to catch some people who are Jewish or Catholic in there. But in terms of the overalls, you're still going to get more white men voting for Trump and more white women voting for Trump. And then you get black women, black men, Hispanic men and women more likely to vote for Biden. So, okay. As to why the U.S. is more conservative. Oh, yes, definitely. Religiosity is a big reason why people are more conservative in the U.S. I think the study looked at Christian nationalism had a higher prediction for Trump voting than any previously measured factor. Yeah, and the number of people who say they're a Christian first and an American second, that number blew my mind. Like, I would never consider myself to be, like, yeah, like, I'm a Christian first. It just shows me how people cannot regard the Constitution as important. If you're a Christian first and an American second, then God's authority and that authoritarian structure, that totalitarianism, as long as you're righteous, that's fine. And if you have to sacrifice some people's rights to be righteous, well, God is all important. So it shows me why they have such contempt for the Constitution. They're not as bothered by Trump's treasons. All right. After the fall of state socialism in Central Europe, Protestant Americans did a lot of the missionary work in there. All right. Well, hey, everyone, I think I'm going to wrap it up because I have another game tonight. And yeah, I'm just going to thank you for your comments. I'll do a little promo for also. I was like so excited. So tonight we are starting off our session of Dragon Heist. Oh, I'm trying to get that without the glare. It looks. All right, there we go. There we go. Yeah, that kind of has no glare or very little glare, less glare. Yeah, I'll be doing Dragon Heist with my new part of the party, continuing on from last time. We are doing it over at the gaming channel, D&D with Christy, and you can check that out. Other thing I was super excited about, I don't think I'll use it too much, but I did get the Dungeon Master's screen for the game as well, because I didn't have one, and now I've got this beautiful screen. We're going to be starting at 7 o'clock tonight over on that channel, and I'll be streaming on Twitch as well. And yeah, we did a session 0, but that wasn't substantive to the actual Dragon Heist game. So we're going to start with our 4 adventurers off they're going to start off in Waterdeep and try to figure out, there's a couple mysteries that I will have to solve and some other problems that are going to get thrown their way. So if you want to listen to some people play D&D as a background, as a little vacation for your mind, you can come on over and watch that show. So until next time, hi Natalie, by the way, good to see you in the chat. Thank you for dropping a line. And yes, we are I'm going to go prep a little bit more now. Until next Sunday. And maybe I'll even, I don't know if I'll talk about how I prepped for stuff. There's not too much stuff on prepping for Dragon Heist, and maybe I'll do a stream on that, but not on this show. Next Sunday, come back here for your weekend winters, for your top up of whatever happened in the last week and my take on it, or whatever I feel like talking about at the time. Or you guys can make some suggestions like Matthew did, talking about the Bradley effect and shy Tory and the lack of perhaps the shy Trump voters. So yes, I'm gonna swap over. Yeah, I'll be a little bit bigger at the end of the show. So guys, until next time, I've been Christy, you've been awesome. Thank you for your time and attention. Be well, be safe, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. So until next time, bye-bye.